one of the questions now becomes, and there's a lot here. Like there's the Matthews question, there's the Sheldon Keefe question, and there's the what's next for Dubas question, and there's also the who's the next general manager to come in here. Now, one of the things that I find, I'll just be blunt, tasteless, is the Calgary Flames aren't letting Brad Treliving talk to anybody. And I'm not a big fan of that at all. I understand that technically he's still under contract, but we all understand how these things work. I would imagine that Brad Treliving would be someone who I could see walking into that position. But that's just top of my head, and having watched Treliving work for a number of years and thinking, oh okay, I could see him doing similar, if not same, with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Anything off the top of your head? I know it's really premature here, and maybe it's irresponsible to do this quickly, but any names jumping out at you right away? Any thoughts on who might be next in Toronto? My first jump here is to Treliving. Do you have a thought?
Yeah, I'd say two names. I'd say that's the first one. And one of the reasons why I would say Treliving is because when Kyle, last spoke to us, he referenced, maybe needing to cut into the core. And he said, look no further than what the Florida Panthers did. And, that deal was orchestrated with Treliving in Calgary, right? Treliving has never been afraid to do some serious surgery. He's one of the hardest guys in terms of working the phones around the league. He's not afraid of a trade. He has the track record of pulling them off, like some significant ones, right? The Tkachuk one's the biggest one, but Noah Hannafin, like there are some big moves that he's pulled off in his day. And we've reached the point where whether Dubas was coming back or not, I think a lot of people around the team feel like this is finally the time to take a hard look at the core and maybe make a potential blockbuster move. If, of course, if there's a suitable return, we're not talking rebuild. It would have to be for someone who could step in and make an impact in a different way. But Brad seems like the kind of guy that could pull off that kind of move. I think he should be a person of interest for Shanahan and the board moving forward here. And the other guy you wonder about, and I don't know if it would be more of the same because, we know he's a smart guy, but he's very much tied to the hip with Dubas, is Brandon Pridham. So he's gotten interest from outside the league, and that is how Dubas got this job in the first place, remember? He was threatening to go interview with, or he did go interview with Colorado, and he was threatening to leave. Yeah, and go to the Avs. Are we seeing the history repeat itself? Are we seeing another up-and-coming executive in Pridham? Like, would it be as simple as he steps in as interim? I mean, nothing was mentioned in the press release. We're going to hit Shanahan with a bunch of questions in a couple hours here. But that is another person of interest, I would say. Are they going to promote within, or are they going to look for a different kind of GM, one a little bit more experienced?
So the dismissals today in Maple Leaf land are not exclusive to the Maple Leafs. The Marlies announcing a few minutes ago, I think 15 minutes ago, that the contracts of head coach Greg Moore and assistants AJ McLean. AJ goes back with like Sheldon Keefe and Kyle Dubas, like back to the Sault Ste. Marie days, and John Snowden. Those contracts will not be renewed. So this goes down to the American League team as well. So we do wonder about Sheldon Keefe through all of this as well. To your point, I wonder about other people in the organization. I don't know if this is going to turn into an Agatha Christie novel over the course of the afternoon, where every hour there's another announcement. But Kyle Dubas out, the Marlies coaching staff out as well. One other name, and here's one that's a little bit of a blast from the past. Although Elliott has mentioned that he was asked to interview in Calgary and declined. I wonder, and I got a couple of notes about this as well. I wonder about Mark Hunter. I wonder about Mark Hunter.
Wouldn't that
London
be
Knights? Yeah, that would be interesting, because that was, let's not forget, the power struggle once upon a time between assistant general managers Kyle Dubas and Mark Hunter. Just to have that one on the table, I think is salient to put out there. You know, he's well thought of by a lot of people, well thought of by a lot of agencies. I believe Wasserman would be one of them. Wasserman through Judd Moldaver representing Austin Matthews. We all know about the Mark Hunter London Knights Association with Mitch Marner. I don't know. That's one that I would, along with Brad Treliving, probably keep top of mind. Mark Hunter would have also had John Tavares in London as a junior player. Maybe let's try to keep that one hot here. Maybe throw Mark Hunter's name out there. Your thoughts on him as a possibility, as we're going to spend the afternoon, speculating on names about who takes over the Toronto Maple Leafs big chair here, Luke.
Well, that's kind of like when you're reading a choose your own adventure book and you get to an ending and then you flip back to where you made the wrong choice and choose the next one. That's kind of crazy to think that they could go back in time and restart this, and let's see if Mark Hunter can do it. I mean, I think he's qualified. It would just the narrative would be kind of crazy, and then the talk of Mitch Marner as a potential trade chip. I think you got to X that one out because I think there's a loyalty there between Hunter and Marner. So if that were to be the case, and we're speculating here, I think. I would have a hard time seeing Hunter trading Marner. The fact that Keefe wasn't part of that press release is really interesting. I guess they just want to let the new GM make that decision. But my thought was Dubas and Keefe were so tied to the hip that if you're going to make a change above Keefe, that Keefe would certainly be in danger as well.
Well, the one thing you can be sure of is the Toronto Maple Leafs will have to, get this process going quickly if they haven't already. Like, I do have a hard time, to be honest with you, I have a hard time believing that they would make this move without having at least gone down the road gauging interest from, at least one of the preferred candidates, if not a couple of the preferred candidates. Like, I don't think that the Maple Leafs are, starting from zero Friday, May 19th, when did the press release come out? Just after 12 o'clock Eastern. I don't believe that to be true. I would imagine they would have at least partially gone down the road and gauged interest from some of the preferred candidates.
Well, you would think. And, I mean, they've had a long time to figure this out. Like, really, this started last summer when they didn't offer him an extension. And there was actual physical distancing between the president and the GM. Like, they felt like they were on solo paths here for a while. And it felt like, you talk about all in, it felt like they had to have meaningful playoff success. And it really did feel that night in Tampa that they were on the right track. And then to have it all undone in less than 2 weeks' time with just such a flat showing against Florida and falling down in a 0-3 hole and all that goodwill and positive momentum that they had generated from the fan base with that first win in 19 years suddenly felt like we're back to square one where Dubas is out there on an island. And if the players that he believed so firmly in, if they couldn't get it done, if they couldn't push through that's the fifth chance, right? It's him as GM. He's been in the organization longer, but you get one playoff series victory in 5 years with that kind of talent. I mean, it just comes down to results.